My name is Kat van der Straten. I'm Ellen Toon, if Ellen can wave. Ellen Toon and I are friendly neighborhood organizers. We're the people who send the Energize Wayland newsletters, and we're also the folks who find all these fantastic actions to do in the face of climate change on our community platform at energizewayland.org. If you're not subscribed to the newsletter, you can do so by going to energizewayland.org and going in the footer, and you can subscribe there. I'm going to try to screen share. Exactly, the platform. I hope you can all see it. So this is energizewayland.org. On this platform, we have a lot of resources for us gardeners, and I'm thinking most of us here are gardeners, because they're relevant to us gardeners because we feel that food is a large dimension of our climate footprints, and there are many local solutions that we can offer to address that. Just to mention two of them, one is a great support group that just started and already has 2 members called Wayland Grows on Facebook. You can join that, where we share advice and we brag a little about our gardens, which is also great to do. And then there's other services like Gardens by Renee, a local business as well. And I just clicked on it. I hope that appears. If you want to get started with gardening or need help maintaining your garden or take it to the next level, Gardens by Renee can help. You can go and check it out on energizewayland.org. Many actions there with regard to gardening, landscaping, food, etc. But why we're here is, it's the season, finally. Most of our seedlings and our seeds are by now in the ground. And we're going into the 3 W's, the waiting, weeding, and watering. It's not my favorite time of the year in the garden, but what I do love about it is that we have to get serious about feeding the plants in our gardens. And the best way to do that, of course, is with organic compost. Just like with water, you do not want to be stingy with compost. So you can make good compost in the garden, in our backyards, with the right mix of browns and greens, time, and a lot of labor, and some know-how as well. And it's just fun to do, and the science will just blow your mind. And you also get to close the loop of so-called waste streams, for instance, food scraps or garden waste, by turning that so-called waste into food for our food. There's of course an art and a science to it, and so tonight we have a professional to give us a little glimpse of what that looks like, and that is Andrew Brousseau from Black Earth Compost. He actually runs the composting operation from Black Earth Compost in Manchester, I believe, Massachusetts, so very local. Before I hand it over to Andrew, I just want to commend Black Earth for their holistic approach to compost and also their ethical approach to waste, food waste especially. I encourage all of you to go to blackearthcompost.com, I think that's right, and check out their philosophy. I think it's very admirable. And so it's for that reason that we partner with Black Earth for 2 services in town. And one of those is curbside pickup of food scraps. If you don't want to compost at all, but you also do not want your food scraps to end up in your trash, Black Earth will come weekly and pick up those food scraps for you. And already 84 people in town enjoy that service and really like it. So, then secondly, another service they provide is they also sell the finished stuff. And they do that either in bags or by the yard. They deliver this, or you can buy them at Russell's. Russell's has these bags as well. I've literally put that stuff under my microscope and analyzed it, and I found it to be of very good quality. And I want to share my screen again and show you. I hope this works. Something. Can you all see it? Oh, you're all muted, so.
I can see it, Kat.
Okay, great.
I'm unmuting myself too.
Fantastic. So this is a compost analysis report of a batch of black earth compost. And as you can see, it's the usual analysis. That's the first page, you know, the NPK, the phosphorus and potassium, the nitrogen, the carbon, the pH, and then a couple of your trace elements, etc. So this all looks fantastic, but I wanted to show you the second page. Black Earth also sends their stuff to a place called Soil Food Web. I believe I get that right. And what they do is what really interests me and what really, what I hope we will be looking at today is they also look at the fungi in the compost, the bacteria, and even nematodes and flagellates and amoeba and ciliates. They look at all of those, and this is what I did under my microscope, to see if the entire food web is in that compost. And this is a very good report. So just want to give you a glimpse of this, that this is really going above and beyond. So I myself am very serious about compost. I've taken several classes. We divert all of our waste streams, so-called waste streams, to our own compost piles. I've even at times asked the neighborhood to drop off their Halloween pumpkins and composted that with Karma coffee grounds. So I know a little bit about compost and what the good stuff is. And I unashamedly admit that I do not make enough of it myself. It's very labelful and I never have enough for my own gardens. And so I buy extra. I complement my own compost and I buy extra to have the garden be happy, and I buy it from Black Earth. So just my personal recommendation for this product. And so I will give the floor to Andrew to show us what is in that compost and how they make it. Andrew, you have about 20 minutes, and then we, if that's possible, and then we will take some questions from the chat box or as people just want to ask them. I'll stay a little bit longer afterwards to talk as well if your question wasn't answered, but we'll try to start wrapping it up by 8:45. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to give the floor.
Kat, we're going to end by 8:45 or more like 8:15, I thought.
Oh, sorry, 8:15, yes.
Okay.
My apologies, yes. It was 45 minutes, that's right. Okay. And I am trying to unmute Andrew, and he is. Okay. There you go.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Andrew. I'm from Black Earth Compost. I will quickly talk to you guys about making compost in your backyard and how we do it. So one thing just right off the bat is that not all composts are the same. And the difference with ours is that you guys have heard of browns and greens. So most composts that are out there, the greens is grass. And that's grass from everyone's lawn. And for our compost, the greens are food scraps, and we don't put any grass in there. And so that is a huge difference, because so the brown is the same largely, you know, leaves, wood shavings, and that. But with us, the greens is food scraps. And the big difference there is on the nutrients that are being added. So the greens provide two things. So people talk to me, they say, oh, you're composting food scraps, right? Like, no, I'm actually not composting food scraps. I'm composting carbon. So I'm composting leaves, I'm composting wood, wood chips, wood shavings. So I'm breaking those down using the tools that food scraps provide, which are moisture and nutrients. So moisture is critical to composting. And so your greens add those two things, moisture and nutrients. So grass provides moisture and food scraps provide moisture. But the nutrients that grass provides are different than the nutrients that food scraps provide. Grass is, so people's lawns are not the epitome of soil health. You know, like they're not really tended. People aren't getting the soil tested. You know, you spread some Marrow on it. PH Lawn Care or True Green or whoever comes out and spreads NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, but they're not spreading the other 40 or so micronutrients that plants need. So food scraps, on the other hand, what are they? They're like peppers, bananas, fruits, broccoli, vegetables, fish, dairy, bread. So all of these things come from the seeds of plants. Like a pepper, it's the fruit that holds the seed. And so that's the most nutritious part of the plant. The banana, eggs, just all the foods we eat are generally the most nutritious parts of the plant. And so it really contains like the complete spectrum of nutrients that plants and animals need because they are themselves plants and animals. So when you put those items into your compost, you're adding that complete spectrum of nutrients. And that's really what makes a food scrap compost so much richer than a grass compost. Like a grass compost will never be able to compare to that. So that's just right off the bat about like not all composts are the same. And like even a lobster compost, or for example, a good example is like a manure compost. So let's say, so all that manure is from one dairy, and where are the nutrients coming to that dairy? Well, it's coming in the feed. And so if that feed is coming from a farm field that's deficient in, let's say, silica and molybdenum, then so is the feed, so is the cow, so is the milk deficient in those things, the manure deficient in those items, so will the compost. So that's another example, potentially in spectrum of nutrients. So yeah, can you guys hear me? Do you understand that? All right. So that's something about food scraps or composting and like the differences between them and like choosing your green. So you guys want to talk about backyard composting, I assume a little bit. I'll touch on that. So I already talked about the two things that are really important, moisture and your nutrient supply, so your greens. And so the number one problem with compost piles is that they're usually dry. And moisture management is probably the number one thing that we manage. And why is that important? Because the action of composting is a biologic action. And so if you have a stick in your compost pile that's completely dry, nothing's going to happen there because microbes aren't going to survive. They're going to be dormant. Microbes live in the tiny film of water that surrounds organic matter. It surrounds leaves, it surrounds dirt, it can surround your stick. And so if that stick is moist, then microbes can live there and they can act on it and be active. So moisture is really important. So let me do a quick whiteboard because I love using the whiteboard. So I have this composting method It's called the bread oven method. And so the other important part, so I said moisture and nutrients, but the other part is your carbon. So let's say this is your compost pile. It's triangular shape. It's 3 feet tall. Can everyone see that? Okay, so over here, you have like an even larger pile of just straight carbon, and this is waiting to be used. So this is like your stockpile. So you should try and hold on to all your leaves all year. Like when they come down in the fall, you want to hold on to them because you'll end up using them. So real quick, yeah, you have a question? Oh, go ahead.
Does that include pine needles?
It can, yeah, a nice mix of pine needles and leaves is fine. I think if it's 100% pine needles, that could be problematic. So what you want to do is start with a pile of leaves right in the fall that's 5 feet tall. That's going to settle down to 3 feet tall after a couple days. And what you want to do whenever, so this model assumes that you're composting something on a weekly basis, whether it's food scraps, weeds are grass clippings. Like grass clippings can come on a weekly basis. So the key is putting the your green stuff right in the middle of your pile. What you want to do is open up your, like a hole to the center of your leaf pile. And you want to put your greens into the middle. You want to do that right away. This is as opposed to, you know, the layer method where you put everything on top. So my problem with that is that people put the stuff on top and then the greens dry out. So then they lose the moisture. And then by the time you put something else on that pile, you're just burying dry over and over. So your whole pile is just dry. But if you open up your leaf pile, you put your greens in the middle, whether it's food scraps, weeds from your garden, grass, then that moisture is going to stay inside the pile and it's going to go exactly where it needs to be. So after you put your greens in there, you basically close up your door. You can take some carbon from your carbon stockpile and put it on top. Can you guys see my mouse moving around? Yeah, okay. So yeah, you can take some of your carbon over here and put it back to cover it up. So you'll close up that hole first and then you can put some carbon on top. So you're always slowly putting carbon over to here. I mean, that's a really basic summary, but the concept really is, so if you do this week after week, and you only want to add it once a week, because if you disturb this core too much, what happens is it never has a chance to heat up. So what you're doing is you're developing this core of the pile, and the outside of the pile is actually like an insulating blanket that helps keep the heat in, and it helps shield from drying out, and it also helps shield from animals, which is a whole other conversation. Like, you really want animals not even to realize what's going on. You want to have enough carbon over this that they never know. And it helps to always open the same door every time to the center, because then all the other sides will settle and they'll be kind of camouflaged and they won't smell. Most of the odor will come out your door. So this bread oven method, it utilizes heat. Heat is produced in the middle. It's keeping the moisture in there, and it's putting the nutrients right in there. So if you do this week after week, eventually when you open this thing up, it'll be black inside. And the thing that you put in there last week will be gone. And if you open it up and it's too wet, then that means that you need to add less wet stuff or add more brown stuff into the core to help dry it out. If you open it up and it's too dry, that means you have to add more wet. So really, I think field signs are really important to doing this. So that's just some quick things on like how to make compost, and I can take some questions on that. I think the only other thing I wanted to talk about is like how compost is used. Let's see. So compost is not soil. Let me go back to the screen share. So compost is not soil. So soil is actually, so down here you have the bedrock, and a lot of times the soil came from the bedrock. It's just the bedrock like breaking down over time, and it's just basically this bedrock all powdered and ground up. There's other sources of soil like volcanic ash, which isn't really the case around here too much. And also like glacial sediments can be this what your soil came from. But either way, the soil, it's essentially ground up rocks and mineral matter. And so the organic matter is actually only a small percent of what soil is. So you see here, 45% of the soil is mineral matter, 25% is air, and that's pore spaces, 25% is water, I guess, and 5% is organic matter. So you can see, if you just take the mineral and the organic matter is only 10%. So soil is 90% mineral matter and 10% organic matter. So compost, in theory, is 100% organic matter. So compost is not soil. Just to continue the thought experiment, like peat moss, like a potting soils, they're generally 100% organic matter. There's really no mineral matter in there at all. So, sorry, that's my my newborn. I don't know if you can hear that, but so people often confuse compost with soil, and I just wanted to mention that. So it is possible to fill a raised bed 100% with compost, and that'll do fine for the first year or so. But what happens is that the organic matter is breaking down over time, and it's the microbes and the fungi that are breaking that organic matter down. They're eating it. And so the level of the raised bed keeps going down, and eventually it gets compact, and like the fine particles filter to the bottom, and then you have drainage issues. So it doesn't work in like year 3 or 4. So the soil blend that we sell, it's a blend of mineral soil. It's a sandy loam with compost. And that's to put like actual soil into your bed. All right, good question. What is loam? Loam is 100% mineral matter. And a loam is actually, so there's a couple different size components of soils, or there's the sand component, sand size component, there's the silt size, and then there's the clay size. And so a loam is the correct blend of clay size, silt size, and sand size. And so if a loam has too much or more sand, then it becomes like a sandy loam. If it's more on the clay side, it's like a clay loam. And then if it gets even farther on the clay side, then it can be a clay, or a silty clay, or a sandy clay. Okay. Yeah, so where does compost come in? Compost has it improved soil? So it's kind of like a supercharger. It provides a couple things. It provides nutrients and it provides organisms. And I like to think of compost, it's kind of like little space pods, little like Starship Enterprises that like contain everything they need to go in there and like do the job that plants need done. Okay, because they come in there with the microbes living there, and the microbes can flourish on that organic matter. So for example, if you just had a sandy soil that didn't have much mineral matter and you just sprayed microbes on, they're not going to do too well because there's nothing to live on. So that's where the organic matter comes in. The organic matter is something that the microbes live on, and they actually eat it. And as they eat it and they excrete it, they're releasing nutrients that are locked in that organic matter. And that release of nutrients is what feeds the plants. And that's essentially how compost works. When you get compost, like 95% of the nutrients are locked in organic matter. And 5% maybe are like in the water solution as like salts, you know, fertilizer salts like nitrate, ammonia, sulfate, stuff like that, boron. So only a small percent of the nutrients are actually available in like the water film surrounding the organic matter. And so your plants use that. And like if it rains, then that can get flushed out. But when over time, like after a week, the microbes will be eating that organic matter and they'll start releasing and replenishing that, that supply of like ready to access nutrients. And the plants access that too. So throughout the whole season, the microbes are eating the organic matter and they're excreting and releasing nutrients. And the plants are accessing those at the same time. So compost really works by action of life forms. And it's like simulating what should be happening in a healthy soil. Like in a healthy soil, you have this whole ecosystem that's eating dead organic matter, releasing nutrients, and mining nutrients out of the minerals that are in the soil. So that's a big component of what microbes do in the soil. So that's what compost is. So compost can be used as like a Kickstarter. So you can use it on like a depleted soil to put it down, get some plants going, and then really over time, you won't need to add compost because the plants should be like, it's a way to kickstart that plant soil system. And as long as you're not disturbing it by like breaking up the soil too much or applying synthetic fertilizers, you can, that system should flourish. And so it shouldn't need like another kickstart. But compost in the first few years can really help it get going, especially on a really depleted soil.
Andrew, I'm going to jump in because there's a question here
Okay.
from someone saying, so you're in a practical question, how much compost do I need a year? So you're saying it sort of jump starts the soil. So are you saying what's your thought about for sort of an established garden? I think this question is about, the beginning of the year, do I add compost? How much do I use? There's a recommended amount per area, or does it depend on what we're growing?
Yep. So for like, if you were digging up your lawn and you were trying to turn that into a new vegetable bed, then you might want to like add 2 inches of compost and blend that down 6 inches. So you kind of get like a 1-to-3 ratio or so of compost to soil. So, and like, so you might want to do that every year, because a vegetable bed is hungry and it's going to be pulling those nutrients out. So you need to replenish each year in some way, either with compost or fertilizers. So for a vegetable bed, you probably want to add some every year. But when I was saying that you only need it to kickstart, that's kind of like if you were doing like a soil remediation project, like at an old gravel pit or something like that, where you're not like harvesting and taking material out of the system and like taking nutrients out of the system, because that's really what you're doing. It's important to think about the whole flow of nutrients in this whole system.
So SB, I think that might be you, Steve. I hope that didn't answer your question. You can ask a follow-up. And then I see another.
Yeah, it is me. So the question would be, these are for vegetable beds that have been used for a few years. I guess, so what would the recommendation be? And also, is it necessary to mix it down? I had maybe naively thought that if you put it on top, that the microbes would leach down into the soil below.
Yep. So that's a good thought example of the whole system. So, like for example, for perennials, we say just like, because you don't want to mix it down because then you'd be messing with the roots. Just mulch it on top. But let's just say that you only put like a 1/2 inch on or 1 inch on as a mulch. Like what's going to happen is that 1 inch is going to dry out, and then the microbes don't live in a dry environment, so they're dormant. Like the compost microbes are dormant there, and so there's going to be no breakdown of organic matter and no release of nutrients. There will be some wash down, but it's really just wash down of that initial whatever nutrients were available. And then yes, some microbes will be washing down, but they aren't necessarily going to have the food down below that they can eat to release nutrients, because there's microbes in your soil anyways. So
what?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so what's I just finished this thought on perennials. I think Steve's is more about like a vegetable garden, which wouldn't have, consistent perennials in it. Because on the perennials, if you don't want to disturb the roots, but you can't let it dry out. So then what is your suggestion? Is it you put something else on top, mulch or something to keep it?
Yeah, so for like perennials, I would say put the compost down, then put mulch on top, because the mulch is really there to protect and keep the compost moist.
So for Steve's question on the vegetable beds, they have had nothing in them since last year. So he's got a fresh patch and he was going to put compost in. Does he mix it up? And I think the question was sort of how much to add per year.
Yeah, so if you already, so ideally, like if you haven't added compost in a long time, then put 2 inches on and mix it in. If you already planted and you mulched with 2 inches of compost, then that bottom inch will stay moist and the top inch will just kind of be a sacrificial moist layer or mulch layer for the year. And what will happen is next year, when you do work the bed, all that stuff will get worked in and then you'll receive the benefits of that compost. And so if you do 2 inches this year, maybe next year you just need to do 1 inch. And the year after, just do 1 inch and always work it in to the soil. Like for any annual beds, I think work it in is good.
See other questions. So I'm going to ask mine if I don't mind, and then with Kat's. So Kat asked, why do you need heat in a pile? And I think it relates a little to my practical question. So I don't have a pile. I have a plastic thing that's sort of like a big wheel and it rotates, and we put brown stuff and leaves, and we put in food waste, but we tend to, and we have two. So we have one that we add food waste to daily and add brown stuff, and then sort of let it get full enough, and then we don't touch it, and we just rotate it for like a year and then start adding together. But listening to you, I'm thinking I'm disturbing it too much.
So the heat is important for a couple reasons. One is for pathogen kill, but you need to get up to 131 degrees Fahrenheit for over 3 days to get that pathogen kill. And you're not going to get that in your backyard pile, most likely, unless you build it big enough. So
she says she gets there, but
yeah,
but we're not all Cat.
If your pile is like 5 feet tall, something like that, you can get to those temperatures. But with like a 3 foot tall pile, it's pretty hard. So temperature, so pathogen kill, weed seed kill, and the other thing is just the speed of it. So biological processes, like biochemical processes, roughly double every 10 degrees Celsius you increase. So as the temperature goes up, then microbes work faster. So that's the deal there. You can compost at low temps, it just takes longer. And also, you don't get as much moisture control, because a lot of times the green stuff has a lot of moisture in it, and the heat helps drive that moisture off, and it helps move that moisture up in order to, so it kind of moves moisture up into like the carbon above it. Yeah. Am I still sharing the...
You're still sharing the soil picture. And
the soil picture? Okay.
Other folks, I know I have, just my follow-up was like, we have this rotating one that we add to each day. Should we not be doing that? And then I just love to hear questions from others.
I mean, if it's working, I'd keep doing it. But usually those tumblers either get too wet and like stuff doesn't break down, I find in the tumblers. And then the problem is in the winter, they freeze. So that's the benefit of having the compost pile on the ground, because the ground isn't going to freeze if it has a big blanket of leaves above it, and the core of your pile won't freeze if it's got that big blanket of leaves above it.
Gotcha. Okay. Questions from others?
Yes, someone asked me about if I'm concerned about fungicide that is on all imported bananas. Yeah, so with food scraps, there's all kinds of potential for stuff there. And that's the same thing with lawn clippings. You have potential of homeowner chemicals on there. And they say that largely they get immobilized in the compost matrix, because soil, it's really sticky in a lot of ways, and it can immobilize these complex molecules. Are they all immobilized? No, probably not. But that's just part of the world we live in. And like, we focus on staying away from grass because of the lawn chemicals that people put on. And we also test for heavy metals like lead, cadmium, arsenic, and those items. And so those are the things that we choose to focus on. And with food scrap, yes, there can be, so an example is like, you can make a certified compost out of food scraps that's not organically certified. Like, I could take a bunch of, fungicide sprayed bananas, put them in a compost pile, and I make an organically certified compost. So that's, yeah.
So
you have to pick your poison.
Yeah. Andrew, could you stop sharing your screen? Then we can again see everyone. Or
Yeah, how do I stop
It's like
sharing?
a
Okay.
red, there's a red button
Yeah.
saying stop sharing.
so we reached 8:15 way too soon. But we can take a few more questions, Andrew, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, yep, I'm fine.
Great, and there's another question. Ellen, do you?
Seeing, that was mine. Two of the folks, Margie and Tony, were saying that they used to do quote unquote real composting with the correct portions, brown, greens, etc. But now we just compost kitchen scraps and all soil and let it decompose. We don't get the high temps, but it seems to work.
Yeah, I mean, if it's working, then keep going. The only thing, so just be careful of animals. You know, you don't want, like, some people just throw food out their door on top of the pile and it disappears and they're like, oh, it's composting, you know, but you're really just feeding the neighborhood animals. So that's not composting. I think you really want to get it into the middle of the pile. And if it's breaking down there and it's disappearing there, then you're doing a good job.
Well, it looks like a question just looking at carbon. Curious if Black Earth has done the full circle curb to garden carbon impact analysis, since your trucks are, you know, unless you're all electric, I don't know, you're having sort of full life cycle cost. I know you guys think deeply about these things.
Yep, we want to go all electric. We have a standing order for one of the Tesla trucks when they come out. Like someday we want the whole fleet to be electric cars, you know, powered off solar panels at the compost site. But we're not there yet. We are entrenched in the carbon fossil fuel world, and we burn diesel, we burn gas, and that's how it is right now. And we haven't done analysis on that. I'm trying to do analysis on the flow of the nutrients, like, because nutrients are generally, they're mined out of rock, like phosphorus is mined out of Africa, and other places around the world, phosphorus is mined, all that. And so, like, what's the carbon cost for that, for those fertilizers to get to here and be used once, you know, in modern agriculture, versus the carbon cost of recirculating nutrients through a compost system where they can be used like indefinitely. So, yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff I'd love to do. We're just trying to like stop food from going into the landfill right now.
Yeah, so that's the big carbon savings use, sort of diverting and reduction of methane gas production from diverting food waste into landfills.
Yep, that's right.
I have a question. Have you or anyone used this beehive method with meat scraps?
Oh, the bread oven?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the bread oven, yeah.
Yep, you can use the bread oven method with anything. You could use it with dog poop. You could use it with roadkill. Like, it's a system that's designed to break down organic matter. So I'm not suggesting you use that dog poop compost in your vegetable garden, but what I'm suggesting is that it's a system designed to break down organic matter, and meat is organic matter, so yes, it would work. The challenge with meats and stuff is that they can be more odorous, and so then you can attract animals easier. So what I recommend is start with the easy stuff. Start with your vegetable peelings. No bread, no cheese, no meat, no lobsters, all that. Coffee grounds, yes. So you do the easy stuff until you like get the hang of it and you get the core of the pile going. And then, you know, toss a lobster in and like see it disappear, because it'll disappear in a week.
Wow.
And another thing I'll mention, and this is related to the dog poop compost pile. So the placement of your compost pile in your yard. So you should put it in a location where there are perennials nearby that can put their feeder roots up underneath the pile and actually feed off that pile. So like just the pile being there will feed the area. You don't even need to harvest the compost out. Don't put the pile up against a tree trunk or on top of like exposed, tree roots or anything like that. Keep it like 15 feet away from trees, but use it as a source of nutrition for your yard. So you could have one of these set up in a certain spot where feeder roots can come under, and you throw all the dog poop in there, and that will feed that part of the yard, and you're taking care of a problem. You want to be careful of like too much water. Like you never want water washing through that pile, because then that can wash E. coli out of the pile. But as long as it's staying in there, it should be relatively safe. So that's just a concept. Not really focusing on the dog poop pile, but more just thinking about the placement of your pile in your yard. Let me put my light on.
Yeah, Margie?
Yeah, you had mentioned coffee grounds, and we compost our coffee grounds. What do you think of chaff from coffee roasters? The chaff that it's a byproduct of roasting the coffee bean?
Yep. I believe it's a source of nitrogen. Yeah, so that would be considered like a green, but it's interesting because it's a dry green. So it's really only providing nutrients. Yeah, I think that should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, and that'll probably be a nice, easy source of nutrients to like start like working your bread oven and getting your pile going.
I have a question about feedstocks. So oftentimes in the fall, you have a lot of leaves, a lot of browns, but you don't have a lot of greens. And then in the summer, you have a lot of greens, but you don't have a lot of browns. I'm sure you deal with that as well, and we do well in the backyard. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, that's why I said have your carbon stockpile. Like your carbon stockpile should be huge. Like you can keep all of the leaves from your property generally in a giant pile, and you will use all of them through the whole season. Like a pile that is really active and you're adding food scraps to it each week will go through a lot of leaves fast. And it's great. You can even go, like people put carbon out on the sidewalk in convenient bags to collect each ball. So, yeah, managing your feedstocks is important. And so another challenge here would be with grass clippings and weeds taken off. So like I said, that bread oven method works really great with a food scrap system because you're adding food scraps once a week. But the thing with gardening is you can produce a lot of weeds all at once. And so in that case, you might want to take all those weeds, mix it with some carbon, put it in a large pile, and then cap it with a bunch of carbon. And just set that pile in a place and like, don't touch it for a while. Because like to make a bread oven big enough to fit 5 wheelbarrows of weeds into it can be hard. So yeah, that's another option.
I love the bread oven, the wording of it. It really makes sense to me. It's like an oven, you stick the bread in and it cooks.
Yeah.
And then you take it out.
Yep, it's insulated, there's one door, and it's warm inside. It's just like the fuel inside there, instead of being wood that's burning via like a chemical reaction, the fuel is your carbon, your leaves and stuff, and it's burning via microbial action.
Fantastic. Yeah, anyone have any more questions?
My husband wanted me to ask this, so since he's cooking dinner, I get to ask it, and I get to go eat his dinner. He says our pile is too anaerobic, needs to be more aerobic. There's a bunch of flies and stuff in our current situation. So has he diagnosed this correctly, and how does he solve it?
Yeah, so that's a great field sign. So going out there, using your eyes, your nose, it sounds like the pile's too wet. So you should mix more carbon in it.
That's what he thought.
If it's just a big sloppy mess, I would bring in like 1 or 2 more volumes of like carbon, mix it all in, and then take more carbon and cap it over top.
Okay, so leaves are basic. Leaves we have plenty in a pile. We have some leftover straw, I guess. I don't know. He says we have some of that.
Yeah.
Would that also be fine? Okay, great.
Yep, straw's good. Wood chips are good.
Yep.
You know, you don't want to make your pile 100% out of wood chips, nor 100% sawdust, because then the pile, you can't get airflow. It's good to have a nice mix, and like leaves are really great just all around carbon source.
I'm going to sign off.
Yeah, Ellen needs to sign. I just have one last, oh, actually Jennifer has.
Yes, I was wondering, is there any role for fireplace ash in compost?
Oh, very good question. So fireplace ash, you want to be very careful with. So what ash is in a chemical fire, all the fuel, which is the carbon, is turned into CO2. So you've removed all the carbon from the wood, and what you're left with is the ash. It's basically everything that doesn't volatilize into the air. So the ash is like calcium, magnesium, sodium, boron, all kinds of mineral elements. And so those are all, fertilizer and nutrients needed. But it's so concentrated that, and the pH is so high because they're all nutrients, that you can, if you threw too much of it on your compost pile, even like a couple cups worth onto a small pile, like a cup on a pile this big might make like a core like this big, 1 cup might change the pH so much that it stops microbial activity. So ash, you really want to be careful of. You could do a little bit at a time, like maybe toss like a tablespoon in each time you throw food scraps in. But I actually think the best use of ash is spreading it on your lawn.
Yeah.
Like spread it really thin out over your entire lawn. Do it like before rain when it's not windy, something like that.
Okay.
I'd love to ask about biochar, but I'm sure that opens up a whole new can of worms.
Yeah, I can answer a few more questions if people have them.
I actually have a question. So I see a lot of, when piles get delivered by you, or people buy bags at the store, they leave them lying outside in the bright sunshine. Is that a concern? Should they be covered because of the drying out issue?
Yeah, so it's good to keep your compost pile moist, because that once it dries out, it makes the microbes go dormant. So that can be a concern.
So
Yeah.
They're just dormant. When it gets wet again, they revive.
In theory, probably not all of them, but some. I mean, certainly a lot of them. Especially the bacteria and fungi.
Yeah, that's good news.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any other questions? Well, we'll share this recording, and if you guys have any ideas for other subjects for webinars like this, that would be great, and we'll try to make it happen. So I want to thank Andrew for taking time out of his very busy evening and a wonderful overview of what goes on in compost, more than most of us know about. We usually do just think of NPK, but the soil life is so important there, and we need to nurture it and use it and farm it in a way, right? That's what we do when we garden. We farm the soil life, and we use them as husbandry, really, to get the ecology, to keep the ecology healthy. So Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank
And
Thank you.
yeah. And
Well,
I will send everyone a link to the recording as soon as I myself have found it. Have a great
Okay.
evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Wayland.